Hello and welcome to the Nope Coach podcast. I'm your host, Suzanne, joined today by Cody Sizemore. We are going to talk about money. Specifically, I don't know why I choose that word. I always struggle to say it. Specifically, money and boundaries, money, relationships and boundaries. And yeah, Cody sent me an email and said, I noticed you haven't really covered this on the show. And I was like, this sounds like a wonderful topic. So Cody, without further ado, where do you want to begin with this massive, massive
Yeah.
topic?
Yeah, it is a massive topic. Especially because like money is one of those things that a lot of people have a hard time talking about, you know? It's like this taboo kind of subject, which it really shouldn't be, but it just kind of is sometimes. But I've been doing this, I've been helping with helping people with their finances for the last like 5 years or so, with my own financial coaching practice. And one of the things that I have found that comes up quite a bit is just like the dynamic between even like married couples, especially, but even just people who are in your life, whether it be friends, family, coworkers, whatever, and the influence that they have on your finances. And if your boundaries are not very much set or they're not in a healthy place, it can be pretty destructive to you financially, but also mentally and emotionally as well. So that's why I brought this up. I was like, I mean, someone who calls themselves a nope coach, like this is just great. You know what I mean? So
Well, a couple of things that came to mind. Firstly, do you have Married at First Sight over there? It's a really lame reality show. I think you guys have 90 Day Fiance or something.
So I'll be honest with you, I'm not really into like reality shows.
I don't blame you.
My wife
And
is though. She might watch it. Who knows?
so anyway, the reason I bring it up is Married at First Sight is it's trash. It's total trash TV, but sometimes you just
Yeah.
anyway. There's an ad running in Australia, probably is finished because the show's finished for the year. But one of the experts, the people who match them up, I use experts loosely, but she runs an ad that's to do with the bank. And the bank says it's one of the big four in Australia. People are more likely to talk about their sex life than their finances. And then the,
Hmm.
the person who's the
Yeah.
expert pops up and goes, I would agree with that. And I just find that interesting because it is so taboo. And the other thing too is tradition, like the family of origin that you grew up with, the way that they managed money or money was spoken
Hmm.
about or not spoken about or whatever tends to be the things that we adopt. And
Yes.
then we just don't question it because you don't think to, because this is just the way that you were taught. Like we don't tend to talk about money in school. Like it's interesting. My kids, I know you've got your older one is 10, is that right? So we've got one around the same
Yeah. Yep.
age.
She'll
Yeah.
she'll be 10 here in about a month. But yeah, and I have a
So
2-year-old as well.
I've got a 11-year-old and a 9-year-old, and
Hmm.
they learn things at school. And I'm like, but isn't it interesting they don't learn about banking or
Hmm.
taxes or anything that's like
Nothing.
useful? But here's a rhomboid. And it's like, I remember my son saying to me, what do I need to learn this for? I said, so one day when you have a kid of your own, you can teach them what a rhomboid is. Because trust me, I haven't used this since I was in primary school.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty crazy, but I actually think that it's like that on purpose. I mean, that's a whole other discussion there, but um there's definitely like a reason for that. It's to keep people unaware so that they can just keep going into a system that just really hurts them,
Yeah.
and that's unfortunate, but it is what we're kind of living in, I think. So,
So when people come to you, because I know, you do like financial coaching, says it in your name,
mhm.
which is awesome. What, like, whereabouts have they had any experience with this before? Are they wanting to make savings or invest, or like what is it that when people come to you, where do you start them off?
Yeah. Yeah, so most of the time when people come to me, they really haven't talked to anyone about their finances before, which again just goes back to what we were just talking about, to where it's like it's brand new for them. But a lot of people who are coming to me, they're wanting to do a number of things, but the main ones are, paying off debt, getting out of debt, building up their savings, looking to buy a home, and starting to invest as well. And then, after we start talking, we kind of peel back the layers and we were like, hey, all this financial goal stuff, like that's great. We'll get you guys there and we'll accomplish that. But there's so much more to it that has to do with like the money psychology side of things. So how money affects you mentally or emotionally, how it affects your relationships, the boundaries or lack thereof of said relationships. And, even just like pulling the best version of you out so that, you're able to actually like step into that 10 out of 10 version of you that you really want to be. So that when you do have the finances in a really good spot, that like you're going to look back and you're going to say, hey, not only was it cool that I was able to get out of debt or build up this money in this bank, but also like I'm really proud of who I am now. And now I can, share those gifts with the world without anything holding me back financially, if that makes sense.
Total sense. Because when you think about
Hmm.
like money and boundaries, and if people struggle to say no in general, and
Yes.
then
Yeah, they
they
do.
have money, and people are like, could I just borrow? And part of you might know that borrow is very loose. Never going to see this
Hmm.
again. Or could you donate to, or would you, I'm just thinking, so like my daughter's in the final year of primary school, so they have the end of year leavers dinner formal kind of event. So they're
Hmm.
fundraising, which makes total sense. But
Yep.
sometimes you get the people that then also just random people. Like I'm from the Seeing Dog Eye Dog Foundation, or I'm from the Australian Deaf Foundation, or I'm like, and it's the boundary to be able to say, like, I love that you're raising money for this. This is wonderful. I've already chosen the charities that I support or whatever, instead
Hmm.
of suddenly just becoming like a sieve that you're giving and giving and giving to everyone and everything all the time because you can't
Yeah.
say no.
Yeah. And it's really difficult because with money and boundaries, it's difficult to say no to other people. And even with like the situation that you just outlined there. But a lot of people have a hard time even just telling themselves no. So it starts there, having a boundary with yourself. And then once you're able to get that boundary in a good place with yourself, then it's like the people around you, whether it be your spouse, your friends, your family, your coworkers, they're so used to the version of you that didn't have that self boundary that then when you do show up as that like new kind of version of you, then it's like they have a lot of contention with that. They're like, why is this changing? And I don't like it, kind of thing? And then there's the whole other conversation about setting that new and healthy boundary with those people too. And that's where things can
Yes.
really get kind of spicy?
I think that's such a great point, because you think about it, if you've never set any sort of money boundary or savings goal or whatever, if you've just kind of lived paycheck to paycheck or in the flow or whatever, and then you decide, actually, I want to save to buy a house or go on a
Hmm.
vacation or pay down my debt, whatever it
Yep.
is. And then you've had a really tough day, like you've dealt with a lot of cranky people, or your kids tantruming, or everything's happened at once. Then you just want to treat yourself. It's like,
Hmm.
it's on sale.
Yeah.
I deserve it. So I think you've got such a point. Firstly, it starts with boundaries with yourself.
Hmm.
Then there's boundaries with others, because they reach out to you and say, hey, do you want to go out for a drink or to see a movie or to have a wine or whatever? And then if you say no, they might take your saying no to them. Or if
Hmm.
you redirect and say, well, how about we go to a park, or, come over here, or like whatever, it's like,
Yep.
then, it's like, oh, it'll be my shout, or it gets awkward. Having the
Yeah.
conversation with people is saying, like, up until now, this is how it's been. Going forward, I want to do this instead. People taking your boundary to mean something about them as a person, when and then, it's the same with eating. Like, I think budgeting, I always tied the word to dieting, restriction. Like, and then
Hmm.
with every diet, there's an equal and opposite binge. Sometimes with
Yeah.
every really restrictive budget, there's an equal and opposite splurge.
Yeah. So I'm really happy that you brought that up because that is a really common uh, connotation that people have with that word budgeting, is that it's very restrictive, that it's that thing that you tell yourself no all the time. And I, I personally, I hate the word budget. I do. I never, ever, ever use it because of what you just said. And it's like you can't get someone excited to do something that they have that preconceived notion to. Like you just can't? So with me, like there's a lot of people in the financial world that will tell you, like, hey, if you're trying to save money, if you're trying to get out of debt, you shouldn't have any fun at all. You should just like white knuckle it and just like sacrifice everything, right? And will you get some quick results with that? Yes, but you're also going to destroy your relationship with money, and that's not the goal. Like in my opinion, the journey should be the focus and not the destination, because if you make the destination the focus, you may not get there. because it's going to be so unenjoyable, right? So my big thing is like, we should just be intentional. We should be intentional with your goals, of course, because that's why we're working on them. But then we should also be intentional with what's important to you. So if you really, really enjoy taking a weekend trip every 3 months with the family, because that's like your love language, cool, take a weekend trip. If you really enjoy having, pizza night on Fridays, cool, let's work that in. But let's be intentional with both the goals and the values. So I don't really call a budget because of that negative connotation. I call it something different. I call it a money map because that's all it is. It's just a map for your money that shows it's where it's going. And it also shows you like where you're at any time, where you're headed at any time, all that kind of stuff. It's just a map, and it's the map for the road that you're traveling on. And that's really what it
Love that
is.
term map. I personally would say forecast. So I don't budget because I have a word allergy to budgeting. I did a whole series of
Yep.
podcast episodes about word allergies, but budgeting, I haven't done that one yet. So I might circle back. Thank you. But,
hmm
for many of us, we have word allergies that are individual to us. Like we have food allergies. Some people can eat nuts
Yep.
and some people can eat gluten and whatever. But it's not about us going and telling other people what they can and can't do. It's observing our own allergies. So if you hear this and you're like, I have no qualms with the word budget, like call it a budget. But if you liked money map that Cody suggested, I loved that because it's like each part has its own destination. That's
hmm
I might adopt that one. Or as I said, forecast. But it's like we, as you said, if you feel restricted, if you feel like you have to knuckle down, white knuckle it, to get to this destination that you may or may not even reach, or you might get to the destination and go, actually, I preferred my life when. Because sometimes when people diet so stringently or budget so stringently, they get to this place and it's like, I've sucked all the joy out of my life. I never go
Yeah.
out. I never catch up with friends. I've canceled all my subscriptions, so I can't even zone out on Netflix.
Yeah.
I'm going to the
And that
library.
that's and that's really important because that's something that I even like when I was getting myself out of debt, I definitely was a very much of like a white knuckle kind of person. And that's why I kind of learned from that because I had a bad experience with it because I got myself out of debt like really quick. But then when I was out of it, I found that I had a hard time enjoying my money again
Mm.
because I was in such a like scarcity kind of mindset that I basically like fostered that myself while I was getting myself out of debt. So, once I crossed that finish line, it was hard for me to open back up again, and that's why I'm so like adamant that it's like, hey, it's about the journey, not the destination, Um, and even with like, people in your journey, whether you take this more aggressive approach or not, it's still going to be a different approach because you're going to start seeing, more money go towards debt, more money, go towards your savings. So naturally, it's going to be just a little bit less spending overall. Again, it's going to be intentional spending from there. And some people, they just don't get it. And, some people don't really care either because they're in a different place in life, that, like maybe their finances are good and they don't need to worry about it. Maybe their finances are not good and they're just not worried about it. Like, people are just in different spaces. And when people are in a different space of you and you don't have that good boundary set or you don't have that clear communication, it can be very taxing on you financially because, obviously, like, if you fall pressure to the peer pressure and you do go out and you blow your budget, so, quote unquote, then you're going to feel like, guilty about it. There's going to be shame. There's going to be frustration, resentment, all that kind of stuff. But if you do set that boundary, but you don't have the best communication, then I think that a lot of people's like main fear around setting boundaries is that they're going to lose the relationship. You know what I mean? And that's something I hear from people all the time. They're like, well, what if I do this and they don't like it and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, it really just comes down to two main values. Number one would be respect, and it's like if you can't respect yourself, or if the people that are in your life can't respect you and what you're doing, then is it really that high quality of a relationship? I would probably venture to say no. And then the other one would be, integrity as well. And it's like, the integrity thing just kind of ties into you being the type of person that does the things that you say that you're going to do. Right. And if you want to like be integral to yourself, but then also show other people like, hey, I am a person of my word. I told you that I was going to be doing this. I told myself that I was going to be doing this. And I need to follow through on that because that's really important to me because the integrity side of things really, really pours into other areas of your life. I mean, that's what I think makes people so successful and also not successful is the people who can stay in true fashion to their integrity. So you take those two things together, respect and integrity, and the people who are quality to you. I'm not even going to say that they're not quality people, but they're quality to you will get it and they'll understand it. And the people who don't get it and don't understand it, maybe you just put a little bit more energy into communicating that with them. And if they still don't get it, then maybe they just aren't that type of friend or relationship that you initially thought that they may have been.
You've raised some really excellent points there. First, circling back to your use of intention, I think like a little, I hate the word formula because people are like, oh, formula, this is like the rule book, but
Yeah,
is intention plus attention equals outcome. So some of us have an intention to
true.
save more money, to go on a trip, to whatever it is, but we don't give any attention to it. We're like, we don't
Mhm.
spend any time tracking or measuring or going over or doing the things that are going to bring in the extra money or curbing the places where I know one of my friends once went through all her subscriptions because subscriptions are the norm now and it's a
Right.
way and she's like, I don't even watch half of these things. So she saved quite a bit of money just canceling subscriptions and being intentional about which things she subscribed to.
Hmm.
And then the thing that you said is, sometimes you do blow the budget, the term we don't like, but,
Right.
and instead of guilting, shaming, blaming, getting on this spiral of doom, going, that was suboptimal, like seriously, but this is why that I'm working towards this. Like use that dip as a reminder for why you set this intention in the first place, rather than a beating stick of this is why you can't save and you suck at boundaries and money and, then because then you end up spending more. Like when you're feeling crap and you've just beaten yourself up, you're probably more like to go, I've blown it now and
Hmm.
just keep on going down. But instead, if you say to yourself, like, yeah, this was suboptimal, this wasn't the best use of me.
Hmm.
However, it's a reminder to why I started this journey in the first place. And from that place, you can kind of curb that downward spiral and straighten it out again. You're not going to recoup what you've just lost, so to speak, but you're not going to
Yeah.
keep going downward. So that was the first thing. The other thing, the fear that people won't like me, that won't be my friend anymore, that they won't this and they won't that. I love how you linked that back to respect. Not to say to the person, if you respected me, because sometimes I think
Yeah.
we get to a point where we're so depleted, exhausted, that we blow up. Like the people pleaser is known as a doormat until they become the
Hmm.
exploding doormat.
Hmm.
It's not that you need to tell them how to be, but it's, as you said, remind them of the boundary and then know in yourself, is this the kind of relationship I want to continue to foster? Or is this a sign as I think it was my grandmother used to say to me when I was a kid, like fair weather friends. Like you'll see
Yeah.
somebody who wins the lotto or somebody who has an inheritance from some long lost uncle. All these people come out of the woodwork and suddenly they're friends. It's
Hmm.
human nature. But it's like, who are the friends? There's Oprah Winfrey quote. She's like, I'm going to butcher it, but she's like, I don't care about the people who want to get in the limo. I want to care about the people who'd ride the bus. So who are the
Okay.
people who would ride the bus with you? And you don't need to say any of this to them, but it's just things, checks and balances you have in your own mind that, because your people, as you said, your quality people, not people are quality in and of themselves, but the people who are quality to you will respect that, hey, Suzanne, Cody, whoever wants to make some changes. And it's annoying. Like, it's like whenever my people that I hire put their prices up, part of me is like, yay, good for them for, commanding more and whatever. And that's like, that means I have to pay more, but I'm happy for them at the same time. So if you have a
Hmm.
friend who wants to do all these things and you're like, I'm not going to go on these weekends every other weekend, I'm going to do it once every 3 months, or you're going to set that boundary there. Of course, part of them will be disappointed or whatever, but they'll also be happy for you as well. And that part
Yeah.
should win out.
Yeah. So I want to say two things. One is a direct kind of response to what you just said, and the other one is something I've been kind of thinking about that I just feel like I need to bring up. Um, so the direct response thing is like when you are setting those boundaries, especially with your finances, with your friends, your family, whatever. Um, I live by a certain quote, and this quote comes from like a older U.S. president, Theodore Roosevelt. I don't know if you've heard of him before, but he's like kind of a crazy, like
I know who's man
inspiring
in the arena
president.
quote.
Yeah, yeah. It's he has a quote that says, "Speak softly and carry a big stick," right? And I
Ooh.
really, really love that quote because of what it means. And I actually have like a coffee mug that says that quote. And I kind of talk to my clients about that when they're, experiencing a boundary issue. And basically like breaking that quote down is like there's two parts to it. There's speak softly and then there's carry a big stick. So the speak softly side of things, when you are installing and enforcing those new boundaries that you're going to be having, I always tell people to kind of lead with like something that I call the three C's, which basically the three C's are to remain calm, to show compassion, and to maintain control, right?
Mm.
So if you're able to do those three things, you stay, you're telling people like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. This is what I'm trying to accomplish it. This is why I'm trying to accomplish it. And you just tell them that in a very calm manner. But then you also show compassion and you say like, and you may not understand it. You might be kind of bummed that I might be staying in, or that, I might suggest that we do something at my house or a park or something like that rather than going to a music festival. I understand that. And, I definitely like don't, I'm not just like ignoring that, so you show compassion, but then you also maintain control and you say, but this is just how it's going to be. And I hope that you can respect that. Like so if you have those three C's, you can really set and maintain that boundary in a really healthy way. And that's the speak softly part of it. And most of the time, if there are people who do respect you and respect, they care about you, they want the best for you, it'll end there. But then there's some people who, kind of struggle with that. And if that's the case, then it's time to break out the quote unquote big stick and you can just decide like, okay, so do I really need to like focus in on this and make sure that they understand like, hey, I'm not messing around with this. Like this is something that I'm being serious about. This is really, really important to me. And if they still aren't getting it, then maybe that big stick is just moving on,
Yeah.
because it's not worth it at that point. So that speak softly and carry a big stick with the three C's is a really good way to not only establish those boundaries, but also maintain them, I feel as well. And
Oh,
sometimes with some people, you might need to go through that process a few times. Like they might get it for a few weeks or a few months, and then they'll kind of forget, and you'll be like, hey, just a reminder, I'm still doing this. And, would appreciate you kind of like recognizing that again. They'll be like, oh yeah, that's right. Okay, sorry, I got it. I got it. Right. So that's just one thing I wanted to bring up too. But the other thing that I wanted to address as well is kind of going hand in hand with like the losing relationships. The other big fear that I hear from people when they're starting to set these financial boundaries is that, they say things like, well, I don't want to be known as or viewed as selfish.
yeah. I'm so glad you're bringing into this because I was just about to segue because we were talking about this before we hit
Hmm.
record. So, yes.
Yeah. And that word in particular, I feel is really misunderstood. Really misunderstood. Kind of like with the word budget, like it just typically has a negative connotation around it, right? When people hear the word selfish, they're like, oh, that's not good. That's like self-centered. You only care about yourself. Like it's gross feeling, right? And I think that on the surface, yes, it can be that way, but I think it also goes back to your intentions behind being selfish. If you're being selfish with the intention of only serving you, then yeah, it has a negative connotation. But if you're being selfish in the intent of eventually having it be something that's really beautiful for you and everyone around you, then it's not quote unquote selfish. So I'll kind of like unpack this a little bit. Let's say that someone goes into like this selfish kind of realm, this mindset or state of being, to where they're pouring all of their resources, all of their time, all of their energy, all of their, everything into themselves. And they're trying to work on themselves, they're trying to, better themselves, better their situation, get their finances in a better place, get their living situation in a better place, get their career in a better place, all the different types of things, right? Their health, their everything, right? If you're just constantly pouring all of this stuff into you, over and over and over on a consistent basis over an extended period of time, eventually what's going to happen, Suzanne, is that these people are going to grow and they're going to blossom and they're going to step into that better version of them. And they're going to have the best mental health. They're going to have the best financial situation. They're going to have the best living situation. They're going to have the best career situation. And when all of those things finally come to head, who does that really benefit? It benefits
Everyone.
everyone around them. Everyone, like, who wouldn't want to be friends with someone who is the best version of themselves? Who wouldn't want to be married to someone who is the best version of themselves? Like, it benefits everyone around you. So at the end of the day, is it actually selfish?
I think
Not
this
really.
is such the point. What is selfish? Like, really, sometimes we hear a word and we just go with it and we don't actually break it down. It leads back to our word allergies. So
Mm-hmm.
another way, for listeners to contemplate this, and if you have pen and paper, if you're not listening while you're driving or walking, I really encourage you to do this exercise, because podcasts are great because we can kind of think that we're learning and changing and going, oh, and doing all this stuff, but we're just consuming. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
another way of eating or spending, except we're using time. So I really
Mm-hmm.
encourage you, everyone listening, to do this exercise as much as you can. Like, yeah, I'll do it in my head. No, pen and paper. Like, pause this, grab it out. On a piece of paper, have 3 columns or a line that goes across the top in 3 spaces. And on the left, put selfless. And on the far right, put selfish. And spend some time filling out those categories. Like, what is selfless to you? Like, I think growing up, my dad would be like, you give people the shirt off your back and,
Mm-hmm.
you do everything for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not that is actually a form of manipulation is something you could explore later, because that's a whole other conversation. Because if you're doing this in hopes that you're recognized or seen or whatever, is it as selfless as you think it is? So
Right.
there's
Yep.
that. So
Yep.
selfless, like, I eat last. I make sure everybody else is fed, clothed. My kids are 10 and I'm still wearing a maternity bra. Aren't I awesome? Do you know what I mean? Like, selfless.
Right.
Then on the right-hand side, selfish. Like, I don't care. I eat first. Everyone else is go hungry. Every man for themselves or woman for themselves. I'm demanding, whatever. Like, put it all down there. And then in the middle, like, what is self-full? Because something that's common in
Ooh.
Australia, I don't know if you have it here, oh, you're so full of yourself. And I remember someone saying that to my son, like, last year, so he would have been 8. And he just looked at them and he's like, who else would I be full of? Like, he wasn't insulted at all. And it was just like,
Yeah.
that is so cool. So, like, what is fulfilling to you? Because sometimes when you're selfless, like when you're raised to give the shirt off your back, others first, yourself last, was the school motto for the first school that I went to. Others first, yourself last. And we just repeated that and become like a mantra. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I really sat with that. And I was like, that's not even healthy. Like, anyway,
Yeah,
that's a
it's
whole other
not.
story again.
Yeah.
But sometimes this selflessness, which we put on a pedestal and we praise and we're like, oh, this is amazing, like people pleasing, it really is manipulative, because you're putting forth a version of you so that people like you and admire you and respect you. But really, you don't even feel like that at all. Like, I want some of the cake, or I want new clothes, or but my baby needs it, or whatever. But the baby has this giant mountain. And also, everyone tends to buy for the baby. Like, when a baby's born, I now always buy a gift for the mother, because you see the baby gets this and that and this, and most of it they grow out of before they can even wear. What does the mum get who did all the work? Do you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Oh, you can't do that, Suzanne. That's selfish. It's like, is
Yeah.
it? Or is it self-full? Like, full of self in a good way? Because as you said,
Yeah.
all those things you described as selfish, if people still have a connotation, if they have a word allergy to selfish, listen back to what Cody just said, but put self-full to it. And I think you might have a whole greater understanding of what you shared, because it's like, it benefits everyone. If
Yeah.
you have a piece of the pie, if you have new clothes, if you are looked after, then you have more to give. It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. Like if you're living
Mhm.
on dregs or on an airplane, as cliche as it is, fit your own oxygen mask first, because if you're passed out in the aisle, not only can you not help anyone else, but you're actually a burden who require other people to look after you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's two things that I wanted to say. So you had started that whole conversation off, which by the way, that pen and paper exercise, um, for anyone listening, definitely do that. That's a really good exercise. So love that. But you kind of like started that whole conversation with asking the question, well, what does selfish mean to you? Right. And I think that it really just goes back to that word intention. I think it really has to do with the intention behind it, and if it's one that is um, self-serving in the sense that it stops there, then I think that that is like a negative intention. But if it's self-serving to where it goes beyond you, then I think that that's a positive intention. So I think that the word selfish really just means what the intention is to you behind it. And then the other thing I wanted to say too is like one thing that I see quite a bit, especially with like the parents that I work with. A lot of parents want to just pour into their kids and just give their kids everything in the world, because maybe they'd never had it growing up. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like I think that there's a lot of it's admirable that people want to give their kids a better life, right? But sometimes, and I see this quite often actually, that parents are actually overextending themselves and they're putting so much time and energy and focus and financial resources into their kids, whether it be into sports or post high school education or just going out to eat or buying things at the store or, taking these like luxurious trips or whatever to create these memories, all good things, but they're overextending themselves so much to the point to where they're putting it on credit. They're not investing into their own futures, like for retirement or anything like that, because they're putting everything into their kids' futures. And it's one of those things where it's like, if you're doing that for 20 years, and you're not taking care of yourself and you're not building your own future over those 20 years, and actually you're digging a deeper hole over those 20 years to try and provide for the kids, eventually what's going to happen is that you're going to get to an age that you can't work anymore. And if
Mm.
you don't have the foundation for you to not work anymore, and if you still have all of these different types of debts from what you were trying to build for your kids as you get to that age, who's going to have to step in and take care of you? It's the kids. So it's like you worked your butt off for the first 20 years of their life to give them a life, but then you took it from them when they were 30 or 40 years old because now they're trying to take care of you, and it's like we have to take care of ourselves first so that we can really take care of the ones that we love the way that we really, really want to, so that when we do get to the end of our age or at the end of our days, we're remembered by the foundation that we were able to give our kids versus the mess that we need to clean up.
Oh, I think that's such a potent point to finish on, because just leading
Hmm.
that back quickly to that table, if you're being so selfless that you're inadvertently casting your children in the selfish column because they get the holidays, the outfits, the education, the this, the that, but they don't realize the cost to you. As you
Hmm.
said, they're going to reach a point where suddenly you're not able to provide that anymore because you're not working. And then what kind of thing are you setting them up to? But also finding that middle, like setting the boundaries with your kids from a
Yeah.
young age. Like my children, we have a limit to how many sports or extracurricular activities they can do.
Hmm.
And the fulfillment of, you need to finish the one that I've paid for, because a lot of them have a term or a semester or a year commitment. Like my daughter now wants to do ice skating. I'm like, that's wonderful. You'll finish cheer first because I've paid for that for the year, and we'll explore ice skating next year. It like learns
Hmm.
for her that she doesn't necessarily get what she wants in the instant. She needs to plan. She needs to, money map, forecast where things go when,
Hmm.
and not just to follow every whim. Because I'll be so curious to see when next year comes, does she actually still want to fulfill this? Because sometimes in the instant gratification, Amazon Prime next day delivery, we go from whim to whim. to teach the people and, our children that things take time. And then, sometimes even if you had all the money in the world, do you have the time to do all your interests? Like, I look at my never ending to read pile and I was like, even if I had not to work at all, I couldn't finish every book I want to read in my lifetime. It's just an
Yeah.
impossibility unless I became a vampire and just,
Yeah.
but
Right.
all of this to say, to practice constraint, like a healthy level of constraint, I think is
Yeah.
powerful for all of us.
Yeah. The beauty, like you said, the beauty is in the middle. It's when you're too all or nothing on either end of the spectrum, that's where issues rise. And that's one thing I want to make sure is like very clear to anyone listening. Is like, I'm not telling you to not sign your kids up for sports, and I'm not telling you to not take your kids, shopping. It's about that middle ground, to where it's serving both you and them, and they're learning from you throughout that whole process, to again, just be intentional with both your goals and your values, find that middle ground, find that balance, and then pass that wisdom on for generations.
I love that. So, Cody, let the listeners know what you do and where they can find you.
Yeah, so I am a personal financial coach, and I help people get out of debt, build up their savings, buy their home, start to invest. But what really makes me unique is that I do put a strong emphasis on the money psychology side of things. So, how it affects people mentally, emotionally, relationally, and what triggers certain mindsets or behaviors with your finances so that you can rise above it, get that power back, and explode forward to where you actually want to be. So that is who I am. That's what I do. And you can find me really anywhere if you were to just type in Sizemore Financial Coaching. But I do have like a free webinar. If you're interested in learning more about this kind of stuff, the webinar is called Master Your Money: 5 Simple Shifts to Rapidly Eliminate Your Debt and Amplify Your Wealth. And you can find that at masteryourmoney.support, not .com, but .support, because that's what I really want to give you guys.
I love that. I'll put the link to that in the show notes as well. But I love the emphasis, I think that's why our messages align on the psychology, on the mindset behind it, because anybody can, as you said, restrict, budget, get white knuckle it, or anyone can just say no to everybody. But then you've got to live with yourself afterward. And what are you creating? A life of, as you said, abundance and a place that you actually want to
Mhm.
live in, or a place of scarcity and lack that you're like, I got all this, but what was it for? It was at the expense
Right.
of everything.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining me, Cody. Thank you everyone for listening. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.